Learn Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Samach Aleph. It's actually the culmination of the sugi of Yayin Nesach, this side of Yayin Nesach. And what we have is a fascinating Rashi, and hopefully we'll have time to learn it. Rashi, as I mentioned last time, for whatever reason, in the sugi of Yayin Nesach, Rashi is very sparse in his interpretations and explanations. He misses out a lot. But what he does here, which he doesn't do very often, because Rashi is a parshan, not a paskin, poisek. Rashi generally explains the Gemara. He doesn't come out to tell us halachas. But over here, he actually gives us a summary of all the halachas of Yain Nesach according to his city. Okay, so let's learn now. We are up to the Gemara here, the Mishnah on top of the page. I'm Chalav Amar Aleph. You're working for a guy, but you're making kosher wine. You're making kosher wine, but it's working for the guy. The nice beshusa, you leave the wine in the domain of the guy. And the question is he trustworthy or not? And can you assume the guy did not go ahead and render the wine yayin nesach? Because on the one hand, he wants to do business and sell it to the Eden, and if he knows that people find out that he ruined it, nobody's going to buy from him. So now, remember, sometimes we say that the wine has to have a seal or a lock and key. So we'll see in a minute. So if somebody, let's say, is making kosher wine on behalf of a guy, and he doesn't pay the guy until he sells it, is hapasuach l'shusarabim. Is if the guy is scared to touch it if he can be caught. So if it's open to the shusarabim, and that means the public can see what he's doing. It depends. If the city, the Yidden roaming in the streets in that city, the guy will be scared, apprehensive to go ahead and ruin his wine or ruin his whole business, his whole geschäft. He wouldn't do that. And according to Rashi, even if there's no chaysim, there's no seal on it, even if there's no lock, you're guaranteed to be safe. Tracy completely disagrees with that. You have to have a seal, even in this case here. For the very reason I've taken in what Tracy's argument is. If the entire city are goyim, then obviously it's us. The guy's not scared of touching. Which guy is going to care whether you touch the Yiddish or not? The only way around it is you have to have somebody sitting and guarding it and watching it. The ein hashomer tzarich is yoshev u'mishamer. The shomer doesn't have to be sitting there all the time. Here we have the concept of yotzev v'nichnas. So basically, we're learning here is a yid. It may produce wine for a guy. The wine belongs to a guy, but he produces wine for a guy to sell to yid. So can we assume that the guy will be scared and he left the wine in the guy's house? And according to Rashi, even there's no seal on it, as long as it's open, exposed to the street, that people from the street can view it and see if the guy messes up, as long as there are Yidden living in that city, then it's good enough. However, if there's only goyim in that city, then the guy is not scared, then you can't. So Rashi holds, we're talking about, even if there's no seal on it, it's good enough. That apprehension or that concern is sufficient grounds to keep him in check. Tais another shame holds no such thing. That they say, of course, you have to have a seal, even though we still have to have a seal. Otherwise, we're all chayshed that the guy would have touched it. And I'll tell you in a second where Tais knows from. From the Gemara later. It says about a Mishnah, right? Right in the middle of the Mishnah, if the only goyim, we say that the only way you can eat it, if you can drink that wine, is if there was a mashgiach there, a yotzev v'nichnas, and the guy has no idea when he's coming. Because if the guy, as we'll see tomorrow later, knows exactly what time you're coming, what's the point? What's the point? So today, in a lot of places, they have these video cameras, that watch all the time. So the goyim, let's say, should be scared that if they touch anything, they can be watched 24 hours a day. So they should be scared. Others argue that after a while you get used to it, you forget that there's a camera there. And therefore, they might still misbehave. And it's not like you have a living person that, as soon as you see a person, that's a constant reminder. A camera maybe isn't. So not all the Rabbonim are happy with cameras. In fact, a lot of them are not. Then the Mishnah continues. Rab Shimon ben Elazar says, and this line here, I don't care if it's sitting in the wine is sitting in the original owner's house. I don't care if they've deposited the wine in another guy's house. It makes no difference. What makes no difference? The Gemara will explain two ways of understanding Shimon Elazar. Okay, then the Mishnah continues, which we learned yesterday. So the first part of the Mishnah is talking about that the Yid is koshering wine on behalf of a guy. And he left it in the guy's house. And the guy has a certain entitlement because it's his wine until he pays for everything else. Nevertheless, we said that if it's exposed to the street that everybody can see if the guy is behaving or not, then it's all right. We're not worried. Said the Mishnah further, and if we had to say, if you had to go, let's say that if somebody goes ahead and he makes kosher wine on behalf of a guy, the nice the bishop leaves it in the guy's house, but the halak kaisa lo his kabalti. In this case here, the guy feels much less entitlement. The guy says to the yid, because the way usually is that the yid has to pay for it as he goes. Here, the guy said, as if you paid me already. And then obviously you're going to pay me as it goes. But in other words, you have complete ownership now. You can walk in and out whenever you want, take the wine whenever you want, and so on. So here the guy feels a lot less entitled and a lot less emboldened than if he can't say, "Oh, it's my wine." No, it isn't. You already he's holding it in his warehouse. He's holding his warehouse. The eat actually didn't pay for him, but he says, "Ki'ilu is kabalti." I'm going to treat it as if you're ready, as if there's a transfer of ownership. That's how I'm treating it. In other words, if the guy is playing around with the wine, as if he's a gun. Then as if I got the money from you. Mutter, then it is permitted. Then it is permitted. If what? If the house is open to the public again, that the guy is scared, he'll get caught. But let's say because he didn't pay, every time he walks in, he needs permission. He can't just walk in and take out wine. In other words, the guy still conducts himself as if he's the balabas. Then until he pays in complete, in total. In other words, the guy feels about boss, and the guy's emboldened, even if it's open to the street and somebody sees him and says, "Hey, it's my wine. What do you want? What did I do wrong?" Is there how you might be shown? This is really the acid. Because the guy doesn't have that overhanging. It's a story. This happened in Beishan. This very story. And the Chachamim, they're acidic. They said that here if there's nobody sitting there watching, or the fact that it's open to the street, he's not scared. You said you're telling me in a Goyish city doesn't help the fact that you said in the first half of the Mishnah that if it's the city, the entire population are Goyim, then even though it's open to the street and so on, it doesn't help because a guy sees a guy touching wine. What does he care? Even if they know it's Yiddish wine, they don't care. But when ask, what about these perfume merchants? They travel through Yiddish perfume merchants. They'll see, and they'll report it. So the guy is scared of them. Now Yidden traveling through. As Teicher says, even though there's a takana only for Yidden to have a shumei takana, you should have these Jewish peddlers selling perfumes so the Yiddish women look pretty. But they have to still travel, so you have to go through Goyish cities. They're always trying. In other words, they're always on the move. They're always on the move. The city has gates and locks, so if anybody comes in who's not part of the city, everyone knows. What a small or nosy city. Everyone knows. Now, Tosha uses as a raya to argue with Rashi. Rashi said before that this din, that if, let's say, the barrels are near a window or barrels are exposed to the street, then even though it belonged to the guy and the Yitzhak made a kosher, we can trust the guy. Rashi says, even if it has no seal on it, even if there's no lock and key, the guy is scared because people can walk. So Tosha says, so, what do you mean? How in the world will the, what's the most question? How in the world will the Reichel know that's Yiddish wine? Most of it, everyone in the city have goyim, so they have their own wine. And a guy walking, Yiddish guy's walking down the street, and he right away sees that. How does he know it's Yiddish wine? But if you learn like I learned says Tosfos, that you have to have a chesima, then goyim don't have chesim on it. So the guy walking, he sees a chesim there. Maybe we had before him Tosfos should be Yiddish letters on it. He'll right away know it's Yiddish wine. He sees a guy touching it, the guy will be scared. So that's the raya Tosfos uses against Rashi. Anyhow, the chalein kishus rabbanim doesn't mean it has to be mamash in the courtyard that you can see, even if it's inside the house. But by a window, it's good enough because everybody can see in. And the ashpa kishus rabbanim, if right next to the house there's a tip, and everybody goes there and they can climb up on top of the tip and look inside, see straight into the house. The guy doesn't know who's on the top of the tip, and therefore it's a good protection. The dikla kishus rabbanim and a palm tree, so you have to collect the dates. It's like kishus rabbanim because people climb. And they'll look right inside. What about pasik reisha? What about it if there's no dates growing because the top of the tree has been chopped off? Is it still considered like enough protection that the guy will be scared to tamper with the wine because people will climb the palm tree? Now, why would you climb the palm tree if there's no dates there? So taka pligi barabachar is an argument. Chad also the chad shari. One says then the wine is forbidden because there's nothing to protect you, and one says it's permitted. What's going on? Man asa, the one who says that it's asa. Why? What did he do there? Lama why would he climb the tree? So he must say the solely cause the solely cause. Why would he cry? The one who Asa says sorry. The one who Asa says, why would anybody climb the tree? There's no dates there anymore. So therefore, the wine tak is also. Just because it's sitting there by a window that you can look inside from the top of the palm tree, that's not a protection, because who's climbing the palm tree? The guy's not scared. And then he says, "Man de shadi zimna." You hear this? Sometime, occasionally, the of the behemoth, your behemoth is wandering about. So the solik, you climb the tree, to find your mate. You can see from great distances, and then you can look inside.
That the guy will be
that's the machlekes. That's exactly the machlekes. Not arguing mitzvahs. They're arguing in, is that sufficient psychologically? Is that sufficient exactly the guy should be scared to ruin his reputation, or that he's not really concerned about? Tell him, learned. Whether somebody bought it or whether you rented a house in the courtyard of a goy. Now they're talking about Yiddish wine. Before we're talking about goyish wine, and you made a kosher for him, and they want to make a business out of it. Here we're talking about Yiddish wine, but you bought space or you rented space in the goyish courtyard. You fill it up with wine barrels. Now there's going to be 4 dinim here, so you have to follow up. This is the nation. So what happened was a Yid bought, he owns a little thing, and he lives there. He's there all the time. But mutter is mutter. He's like a Yaitse Benichlis, because he's not there all the time, but it's like Yaitse Benichlis. So the guy is obviously scared to touch it, so then the wine is mutter. In this case, you don't even need a key, you don't even need a chaysim, because you live mamish there, and it's not his wine. There's 2 points here. Because it's not his wine, he's not so emboldened to go ahead and say he's a ganef going to someone else's wine. What's going to be his excuse? Why is he touching someone else's wine? And second of all, the Eid is there. That's case number 1. What about the Chotzer Acheres? Case number 2. He rented space for the wine, but he personally doesn't live in that courtyard. He lives in another courtyard. So there's a step less vigilance here. What happens then? Then it's mutter only. Now you need that extra condition. That then you need that the key should be, or the key should be in the hand of the Eid, or there's a chaysim on it. Because you're removed, so on the one hand, the ganef is a little bit scared. He's a ganef, it's not even his wine. What's his excuse? So therefore, we have a chaysim or maftech. That's good enough. That's case number 2. Case number 3. What if the wine belongs to the guy? The wine belongs to the guy, and you made it kosher, and you're selling it like we have many instances. The wine itself belongs to the guy, and he made it kosher, and he's going to sell to Yidden, and he wants to do everything right. And we'll have the same 2 differences. Is b'shusay, and he left it in the guy's house. So now the same 2 differences, and that is what but here the guy is more emboldened because it's his wine. So we saw Darba, he's a chotzer. If the Yid lives in that chotzer, it's a step lower than the first case where the Yid's wine. So what do you need then? You're living in that chotzer. Before we said if it's your wine, you don't need anything. You don't need a key. You don't need a chaysim. Here, the chalapachas, you need a key or a chaysim. Mutiv v'hu shemaftei b'chaysim b'yadei. You need a key. That's what Rabbi Yechon says. That Omer Rabbi Yechon Tana to need to learn afapisha ein maftei b'chaysim b'yadei mutiv, because he lives there. Because the Yid lives in the chotzer, then it's mutter. Even though the wine it's mutter. Even though the wine belongs to the guy, he's a bit emboldened, but because you live there, it's no different than having a Yaitse V'nichnes, and therefore it's mutter. Even though there's no key. What about the Chotzer Acheres? Now here's the worst of the worst. The wine belongs to a guy, so he's not so scared. If he gets caught, it's my wine. Yid lives in another chutzner. No, he can come in whenever, but he lives in another chutzner. In this case, Asr, according to the mayor, completely helpless. Can maftech, avapisha maftech b'chaysim b'yadei. Even though, why? Because the guy is not scared. It's his wine. It's his wine, so he's not scared, and you're not there. You're somewhere else. Divrei Rameir. The Chachamim, the Chachamim say it's also, but until you have a mashgiach there that comes, that sits there and watches, or he comes. Now kitzin, we'll come back to him more later, but kitzin means fixed times. It's like you tell him, okay, we're going to come once a day at 4:00 in the afternoon. We'll see you more later. That's the worst kind of mashgiach is that. The government here, before they come and inspect your place to see if it meets standards, they make an appointment. Yeah. They tell you exactly where they're coming. So that day, you make sure everybody does all the right things, they follow all the laws, and you're all right.
But I mean, you come and inspect.
Yeah, exactly. Now the question is: this comment of the Chachamim, you need a Shomer Yoshev a Mishmar or a Shomer that comes from time to time. Chachamim Mahaya. Which of remember we had 4 cases here. 2 of them where the wine belongs to Yid if he lives in the chutzner, not in the chutzner, and 2 of them where the wine belongs to the guy in the chutzner, out of the chutzner. So which case the Chacham making it's usher until you have a guy Yoshev Mishamer. What is that talking about? Ilema Sefer on the last case. That what? The last case is it's the guy's wine and the Yid leaves in another chutzner. No, so what are they arguing? The Meir also said it's usher. Tanakh basic usher. The Tanakh also was the first time. He also said it's usher. And obviously if you're sitting and watching, the Meir would agree it's good enough. So what's going on here? The Sefer. The first case was Goyisha wine, but you're living in that chutzner. What do we got? So the first Tana said you need a maftech and a chaysim, and the Yechina says you don't need anything. You don't need anything. So how can the Chacham come along and say you need a Yoshev Mishama? We're talking about he lives in that chutzner. Rabbi Yechina says change the price around and say that even though there's no chaysim, there's no key. If he lives right there, I don't care if the guy's wine, it's kosher v'yosher. So what's Chachamim coming in? Rabbi Yechi's arguing with the Chachamim here. So the Hakam Rabbi Yechi Tana Tuni have a b'shem after Chayis b'yada. Can't be the Chachamim saying it's usher until you have a mashgiach. Ella asay for the Reisha. We're talking about it. The wine belongs to the Yid, but the Yid lives in another chutzner. The Yid lives in another chutzner, and we said there that it's all right if you have a maftech and chaysim. Why? Because the wine belongs to the Yid, but you don't live there. And the Chachamim say the Tanakama said the Chatzar Acheres Muter who provided Shemaftei b'Chayis b'Yadei. The Chachamim agree. They say that's not good enough because you're living in another Chatzar, even though the wine belongs to Yid, sitting in the guy's house. It's not good enough. Okay, good. Now we resolve that, but now we don't understand. What kind of shamash is that? Until a munah come that does not tell you what time he's coming. Really? By the way, if you have a chance later, you're not going to be here. You have the Rashi, the end of the one at the bottom of the page, gives a summary of the whole sugya. Of the way he learns, and very seldom we have Rashi. Yeah, now we have clear shit. But the Madna Zachir, I just really that the Ran and the Rishonim learned there were 2 Rashis here, because the Mamish argue. One version of Rashi says it's mutter b'hana, but also drinking. The other version of Rashi says also b'hana. There are 2 versions of Rashi, and the Rashi sometimes not. That's why they sometimes say it's a mistake in Rashi, because the other version of Rashi, which is the one that they like, it doesn't fit in. Which is the Kama, which is the Basra. So who knows? So that's why somebody you'll find it here. Sometimes the Rishonim say there's a Tos Atfus in Rashi. You very seldom find that the Rishonim will say there's a Tos Atfus. But that's why. So yeah, this is a good summary of this Rashi here. The 3 dinim of Yain Nesach. Whether it's Koyach, whether it's whether it's your force, I did the bracha, and we'll get to it later. Whatever Shimon is saying, this one, whether it's in the guy's house or whether he deposited another guy's house, it's the same thing. Is it a statement or a question mark? So Gemara has 2 ways of learning. Our question is, Rab Shimon ben Elazar lahaka, is he coming to be mekel? In other words, that the Tanakhama is saying that in a goy is a city where all goyim, you're not allowed to leave it in the guy's house. Nor even if the guy gave it to a third party who has no vested interest. So the original guy is going to be scared to go to the third guy's house and do it because the third guy might tell the Yiddish owner, because remember Yid is involved with the wine, and he's trying to sell to Eden. And Campbell makes no difference. It's us. Comes along, Shimon Lazar, and he says no. That Shimon Lazar is saying it, you think it's a question mark. You think see, it's all the same. It's very different. If the original owner's house is his house, he's emboldened. If it's the friend the guy's house, he's not emboldened. It's good enough, even though it's another guy. It's good enough. Oila Hachmer, although they ran. Tanakam is saying that this only us if it's in the original owner's house, but if in the other guy's house, it's mutter. Shimon Lazar says no. It's everything is achasi. And why taka? Because we're scared that the goyim are all cahoots, and I'll cheat. I'll let you cheat now, and the next time if he deposits, does the same deal with me, and I deposit by you, you're going to let me come in and cheat, and you're not going to say anything. So they have the deals going on behind people's backs. The Gemara explains. The Kaman says just like in Yiddish, I don't care where you put it. It's also everywhere. You can't. Why? Because Chashin the Goyim is scared they're in cahoots. Rav Shimon says, only in the original guy. Why? And he says in a question mark, you choose goyim, you think it's all the same? We're not worried about being in cahoots. However, Nachman is all the way around. He says lahachman. Said by Medram, which was only in the original owner's house. I was another guy's house, mutter, because he will take care of it. But like Hashin, we're not worried about these deals. Says, it's a statement, not a question mark. Oh, rishus, it's all the same. Tanya Kavasa the Nachman Omazidi. We look at Nachman as Machmed. Obviously, says this is what the Brisa says. Kol Rishus Oivdi Gacham Achasi Mipnei Haramoyin. You can't trust them. It's clear. It's a statement. I don't care what it is. The Vei Parzik is the name of a person. Rufila. Rufila is the viceroy, the king's viceroy. The deputy king, second in command. Interesting. They're all close to the Eden. Oisibu Chamra. He once placed his wine. Kosher wine, Gabe Adesai. He gave it to trust, to deposit to his sharecropper. He said, "Do me a favor, hold it in your house." And remember, we just had a machlekes. If it's somebody else's house, if it's good enough. And the question is, according to one that says someone else is good enough, what about if he gave it not to a stranger but to his sharecropper? Now, sharecropper is not so much like a worker because he actually gets a share. He's a partner, partner. Some Rabbana kamei the Rabba l'meimer. Rabbana wanted to say, according to for Rabba, even those who hold that we don't trust another guy, we don't trust another guy. We're scared they're in cahoots. Hani mili when it's normal. Because today you're the one that you're doing and you're depositing by me. Tomorrow the Eden will do it. I'll deposit by you. You'll never find that the sharecropper, who on the ladder is in the very bottom rung, is going to have a deal with the viceroy of the king. You say, you know what? Next time I'll put wine in your house. It doesn't happen. They positive feel the guy says there's no cahoots over here. Everyone else, the only reason why we don't trust him is because maybe they're in cahoots. The sharecropper we don't trust because he's scared of his master. Or he's scared of his employer. Even though he's a sharecropper, his employer could think of another sharecropper tomorrow. So he's never going to dub him in. Even if he knows that his employer went and touched the wine or stirred the wine, he's not going to say a word. Even the one who said the gentleman not worried and you could trust it if it's another guy's house. He's not scared of him. Over here, the sharecropper, keeping the middle, he's scared of his boss. He'll protect him as a chusay, and he will always find him virtuous. Was a city that have a Yosef Bechamri, so the city that had the Yiddish wine. And they found a guy standing between the barrels. And the question was, what did the guy do? What's he doing there? What did he do? Are you worried that he tampered with the wine? Amarava says, Rabbi, if he has to open a lid, open a seal, and he'll be suspected of being a ganef and he'll be charged accordingly, then chamra shari. Then that in itself is a sufficient protection to make sure that he doesn't do it. However, be lying, but and you're not even drinking.
No consequences that it's awesome.
Exactly. If not, also even hana, because you don't know that he might have been enough.
So the guy's a worker in the warehouse or something, then you have a problem. He's supposed to be there.
Yeah, but if you have a double single, no problem. Now let's learn the Rashi in the bottom and give a summary. There are three possible cases of yain nesach. Obviously, the main one is you're pouring in front of Avodah Zarah. We're not talking about that. Talking about all the others. One is shichshach, stirring it. You're not near Avodah Zarah, but you're stirring it. If you just touch your finger, that's it. You have to stir it. That's going to be asabana. The next one is touching it ayidei davar acher, which Rashi holds is no different. This is the chiddush of Rashi, is no different than you touching it directly, because since you're using it, your force, and depends if it's intentional or not intentional. We'll soon see. And the third case is where koicha, your force. That means if you throw it. According to Rashi, again, but Rashi holds koicha if you're pouring. Pouring is your force, but if the force is holding on to it, if you're holding on to the jug while you're pouring it, that's like you're touching it. But if you're throwing it and force, it's mutter. So let's do Rashi. Maskon Milsa. Conclusion of everything about Yain Nesach. Rashi. Maga oivek a goy touched it. The kibush in this cabin, liga, if he intended to touch it, and he wants to or to stir it. So this is the strictest one. He stirs the wine, or he deliberately touches the wine. It is asa bahana. From the case of the Mishnah, that's an inspector went around, and the only reason why we were lenient there is because he's not interested in the wine. He touched it to see whether it's really wine, how diluted it was. Are you cheating? You put too much water in there. And the reason is tell the Nazir go away and to circles don't get too close to the vines. So we're saying over here, yeah. Shalai bekavana. What about if he touched it, but he did not have intention? What do you mean? There's different examples. For example, he didn't realize it was wine. He thought it was oil. He thought it was beer. Then mutter bahana, still awesome to drink it, but it's mutter bahana. How do I know that? The masnita, the chedim, from the Braisa, we learned about this Meshugana who went ahead and and started touching everything. And then we asked the drinking and then so on. But he had no idea what he was doing. The chein, other case, another example is nafal boy. The guy fell into a boy, right? He had no intention, no kavana to touch it. He fell in. It's still also drinking, as long as he was dead when he came out. Shalei bekavanu mutar bahana memasnisin. We learned in the Mishnah that's mutar bahana, not full of boy. It's mutar bahana. Not like Rav Shimon says it's completely mutar. The chein, again, so a third example of not having kavana. These are all examples of touching it directly, but without kavana. You had no idea what the contents were, or you didn't want to fall in, or you did want to touch it, but for another purpose. For example, so you wanted to catch the essay was falling inside. You put your hand out to catch it. So you knew you were touching the wine, but you had no intention of touching the wine. Your intention was to catch the essay. All these cases, because you touched it directly, it's still usher in drinking, but the yain nesach part, in other words, the chasnus part remains. Remember, not drinking it because we don't want you to interact and get too close, socialize. So the drinking part remains, exeda is exeda. But the yain nesach part, because you didn't know it was wine, you had no intention of touching it, or you had intention of touching it for a different purpose altogether, there's no yain nesach here. So it's mutter bahana. Okay, that's first category. Category number two. Maga you touched the wine, but you had another implement in your hand. We had the case where you had a lulav in your hand, the way Rashi learned, and you touched, and you're coming down the tree, and the tip of the lulav touched the wine. So you touched the wine with a davar acher. So if he did have kavanah, what's the din? And if he didn't have kavanah, what's the din? Now remember, Taisus and the Moshe Shem argue with Rashi over here. They hold that if you touch through davar acher, it's not the same thing as touching directly, and therefore, if it's a double negative through something else and no kavanah, it's totally permissible.
Because a lot of wine places use a pet. It's a tube
to measure.
Block off one end, it creates a suction. So take out a bit of wine to check it, whatever you want to.
Yeah, but that there is kavanah to him, but kavanah that's called midah. That's called madan. See the minute. So category number two, maga oiducham ayidei davacha k'moi bekana b'knei hamida. That is exactly to measure, let's say, how deep the wine goes, or to take some wine out to see what it tastes like. Okay, so now in this case here, I'm just saying with the if we knew that you, on the one hand, you wanted to touch the wine, but not for the wine, you want it for another purpose. For example, you want to measure the wine. We learned that you wanted there was a hornet there or a wasp and you wanted to blow it away. Is mutter bahana. It's also because Rashi holds that a middle thing is no different than putting it directly with your hand, because you're doing it with your hand. Is no different than directly with your hand. We're talking about it's in your hand and you're bringing it with you. So therefore, whatever the din there is, the same thing applies here. If it's bekavana, it's asa bahana. Like bekavana, it's mutter bahana, but it's still asa in drinking. Not like places, I mean, time and others. What about bekavana? What about you did a bekavana? You had something in your hand with kavana, you touch it. We don't know what exactly your intention is. Then asa bahana. That is mamish asa bahana. Now, who did the Beidim from that story in Beidim, the Shari Rav, the Mishum Leibe Kavanah have it. Rav said, well, there's no Kavanah at all, then it's mutter. But Kavanah Asr. Had it been Kavanah, it is Asr. Okay, so no, as Rashi holds, there's no difference. Maga Aidei Davar Acher or direct Maga. If there's Kavanah, it's Asr Bahana. No Kavanah, it's mutter Bahana, but it's still Asr B'Shtiyah. The chasnas part, the socializing still also, it's the yain nesach part. Right. So this middle category is where all the Rishonim argue. Category number three, koicha, force. Force shall oivek gechavim. Again, the Rishonim argues where Rashi holds. Bechi buron, if you're holding in your hands, you're pouring out wine from a jug. You're pouring out wine from a jug. So that's koyach, directly touching it. Hikabaj your yain, if you knew that was wine, then asabana. Then it's like touching with your hand, and asabana. He said, Damoida went and he saw them pouring wine and he didn't say anything. And he said, go out and tell him it's mamish yain nesach. What about loy hikaboy? If he didn't know that it was wine, The guy was it's only koyach, but he had no idea it was wine. He thought it was something else. He thought it was beer. You remember the story there where they sat there and they saw this guy. They thought it was this waiter. They thought he was a yid. Turned out he was a guy. And one of them says mutter. Why? Because this guy knows that Eden don't use a guy, and the guy will think, must be beer. No way in the world be wine. And he was matter completely. So we see that koichai knows by the other two touching, even if he had no idea it's to us and drinking. Here, because it's only a force, and you had no idea, completely mutter. So it's a step lower. That one of them said it's mutter afil b'shtir. Why? The guy had no idea that it was wine. In fact, he assumed it was beer. What about, let's say, you were not holding it in your hand, you threw it. Because it's force, even if you throw it, the wine, something, that it's mutter even drinking. But feeling is kaven, even hakavana. How do I know that? When Ravashi laid down a rule yesterday. Kol shebezov toy, if a zov who's very tummy, if by him this particular law, this circumstance would be toy, then now a zov throws something does not metame, sending by goy. That's what the Rashi wrote, and that's halacha l'maisa. Obviously, no, this last part. No, the last part wasn't written by Rashi. Rashi finished with Yain Nesach, and the next part here. Yeah. And that's what Rashi learns in the case of the barrel, when these guys who brought the barrel to the if a guy brings a barrel of grapes and he brings it to the vat, we said minei. So Rashi learned if he threw it, then if he threw it, it's mutter complete in drinking. What you want talking about? So Rashi learned he rolled it and rolled it and rolled it, and we're scared that the barrel actually touched the wine. Because the barrel touched the wine, that's magai de davacha with kavana, and therefore be asa bahando. Anyway, this finishes this part of Hayan Esef. Tomorrow we start talking about if you get allowed to get paid for doing work with goyish wine and all that kind of stuff. Okay.